Welcome to This Explainer. Have you ever actually stopped to think about how an idea takes root in someone's mind? Or why the exact same message can completely transform one person, but just bounce right off another? Well, today we're going to trace a really fascinating, continuous metaphor across three ancient texts to figure that out. We're looking at a concept that spans centuries of writing, literally following the journey of a seed from the heights of the heavens straight down into the gritty, unpredictable soil of the human heart. If we really want to understand how these ancient writers visualized communication between the divine and humanity, honestly, there is no better way than to just follow the seed.
So let's jump right into part one, the unstoppable word, focusing on the source of the seed.
Okay. Looking at this passage in the book of Isaiah, I am always struck by the super vivid physical comparison. Isaiah takes the rain and snow, stuff falling to water the earth, and uses it as a metaphor for the spoken word of God. By tying something as abstract as a divine utterance to something as undeniable and, frankly, life-giving as the weather, he sets up a massive premise here. The source of this seed isn't framed as a mere suggestion or some distant philosophical concept. No. It's presented as a literal force of nature. It's inescapable, undeniable, and just packed with potential.
And when you actually break down the mechanics of this agricultural cycle, the progression is super interesting. The word isn't just spoken into a vacuum, right? The precipitation falls, it actively makes the earth fertile, that fertility provides seed for the sower, and ultimately it puts bread on the table for survival. It's this perfect, highly efficient loop of life. The metaphor is basically telling us that this communication is incredibly active and practical. It is literally designed to create life and provide sustenance from the ground up.
Now think for a second about how many empty promises or meaningless words we hear every single day. We're constantly surrounded by words that are spoken, completely forgotten, and returned totally void. But this specific word, the one Isaiah is talking about, is described as entirely different. It's on an unstoppable trajectory. Once it leaves the source, the process is locked in and it will accomplish its will. It is absolutely going to achieve the end for which it was sent. No exceptions.
Which brings us to part two, creation's eager expectation, the environment itself. So we know the seed is an unstoppable force of nature, but where exactly is it landing? In the letter to the Romans, the writer, Paul, frames this environment with a pretty stark contrast. He doesn't sugarcoat it, he acknowledges right away that the current physical world is just full of suffering. It is a harsh, difficult place to be a seed. But he argues that the sufferings of this present time are basically nothing compared to the upcoming glory that's waiting to be revealed. So he's setting the stage of an environment that is currently struggling big time, but is profoundly hopeful.
And this brilliantly illustrates the gritty struggle of the soil itself. Creation isn't just some passive dirt field peacefully waiting for rain. It's subjected to futility. It is enslaved to corruption. It is literally bursting and groaning in labor pains as it eagerly awaits freedom. It really paints a picture of a world that is tense, expectant, and desperately in need of that fertile, life-giving word we just saw back in Isaiah. The soil is totally stressed out, but man, it is ready.
And crucially, humanity is caught right up in this tension too. The text points out that we possess the first fruits of the Spirit. What does that actually mean? Well, think of it like a down payment, or getting the very first taste of a massive coming harvest. Because we have that taste, but we're still stuck living in this physical environment, we are also groaning inwardly. We're eagerly awaiting our own physical and spiritual redemption right in the middle of a very challenging, corruptible world.
Moving on to part three, the sower and the seed, taking a look at the act of sowing.
The scene here in the Gospel of Matthew is incredible, and honestly, it sounds a bit chaotic. The crowd is so massive and pushy that Jesus is forced to literally get into a boat and push off the shore using the water as a natural acoustic amplifier just so the thousands of people on the beach can actually hear him. And right there, speaking to a working-class agrarian society that intimately understands the harsh realities of dirt, weather, and crops, he just starts deploying this agricultural metaphor in real time.
He tells this seemingly simple story of a sower scattering seed. But notice how wildly indiscriminate this is. The farmer just throws it absolutely everywhere. He doesn't carefully place the seed in the good dirt. No, it hits a hard walking path and immediately gets eaten by birds. It lands on rocky ground and just burns up in the hot sun. It falls into thorns and gets completely choked out. And then finally, some of it hits rich soil and actually produces fruit. The quality of the environment completely dictates the survival and success of that seed.
All right, part 4, the mystery of parables, looking at the filter.
The disciples actually interrupt Jesus right here to ask this exact pivotal question. And it's a really great question, right? Think about it. If you have this life-saving, fertile word from the heavens, why on earth are you hiding it inside mundane, folksy stories about farming? Why not just speak directly and plainly to the massive crowd? Jesus' answer is so fascinating. He basically explains that these parables act as a divine filter. To those who possess understanding, meaning those who are genuinely seeking the truth, the story opens up and grants them immense knowledge. But for those who don't actually want the truth, or who are secretly hostile to the message, well, the story just sounds like a confusing tale about a careless farmer, which effectively conceals the truth from them. The parable literally protects the message.
And right here, the text directly loops back to our very first source, noting that this is actually fulfilling Isaiah's ancient prophecy. Isaiah warned of a people with a gross or calloused heart. They'll purposefully close their eyes and ears. They'll look right at the truth but never actually see it. They will hear the words but never understand them. Why? Because they want to avoid conversion. They don't actually want to be healed. The seed is just bouncing right off the calloused, hard path of their hearts.
Jesus then draws this really stark contrast. On one hand, you have ancient prophets and righteous people who lived in that groaning, expectant creation we read about in Romans. They desperately longed to see this exact revelation, but they lived too early. They never saw it. On the other hand, you have the disciples, whose eyes and ears are called blessed because they are finally perceiving these world-changing mysteries right in front of them.
Finally, part 5, the harvest of the heart. Let's look at understanding the yield.
So here's how the entire metaphor finally decodes, directly linking the physical dirt to human psychology and our spiritual receptivity. Let's break it down. If a person hears the word but doesn't understand it, they are the hard path. The word just sits on the surface and gets stolen away. If they receive it with joy but have zero depth or roots, they're the rocky ground. The second tribulation or pushback hits, they burn up and abandon it. If they hear it, but let worldly and anxiety and the lure of riches consume their focus, they're the thorns. The word simply gets choked out by modern distractions. But the rich soil, that is the person who hears the word, genuinely understands it, and bears fruit. And for that seed that finally hits the rich soil, for the person who pushes past the suffering of the present time, who listens closely and truly understands the unstoppable word, the yield is exponential. It is not a one-to-one return. It multiplies 100 or 60 or 30-fold. To put that into perspective, in agrarian terms, a 100-fold return is a miraculous, staggering amount of growth from just a single seed. It changes absolutely everything.
So we've watched this unstoppable word journey all the way from the heavens, splashing down like rain into a tense, groaning world, all to test our receptivity. It's a remarkable journey across these ancient texts, and it leaves us with one critical, deeply personal question to consider today. When the word inevitably falls on you, what kind of soil are you? Definitely something to think about. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.